Welcome to another episode of Stop Doing Stupid Stuff podcast, brought to you by Transform CX, where we dive deep into the practical aspects of corporate culture and decision making. Join your hosts, Tim Keefe and Andreas Wieman, as they unravel the complexities of emotional inertia and its profound impact on organizational change. Whether you're an executive, a manager, or just passionate about enhancing workplace dynamics, this podcast promises insightful discussions and actionable advice. Let's begin.
Hi, everybody. This is Tim Keefe with Transform CX, and welcome to another Stop Doing Stupid Stuff podcast with my partner, Andreas Wieman. Today, I shouldn't do the topic. I'm going to get yelled at here. But I did hit the record button. So, Andreas, would you like to introduce the topic for today?
Yeah, I mean, you were kind of on a roll there. I don't want to interrupt you or anything. It's not like I have an issue with emotional inertia or sudden change that's going on, and I don't adapt to it, on the fly well. And I swear we didn't plan that either. Tim just, naturally likes to do whatever he wants. No, but seriously, our topic today is emotional inertia. And I think a lot of folks are everywhere at all levels and all facets of life are kind of dealing with this right now. There's so many different variables coming at us, and we're having to figure out together, how do we deal with them, and how does that make that feel when we deal with them, and how does that, at least the way that I think of it, how does that affect our decisiveness or our decision making ability? What level of impact does that have on the clarity of the decision making that we have? So I think it's a pretty good topic, because I think it touches pretty much everybody in every industry. I don't think there's an area it doesn't.
And I think having been doing, both as a consultant and an internal executive and manager within any, variety of companies, there's always this challenge in an organization of someone can have a great vision for a change. It could be a radical change. It could be a smaller change. It could be whatever. And there'll be all this energy around building a roadmap and blah, blah, blah. And then when it comes to execution, like the organization just doesn't execute for a variety of reasons. And you're like, but why, right? Like, why won't, people adopt to a new technology, a new learning system, a new way of, and find out as you talk to people that they're just like, yeah, I've been here for 10 years. This is the third vision that we've seen. And you know what? That's fine. And in 6 months, there'll be a new executive at the top who will have another vision.
We'll bring in more people to help them, quote unquote, execute on that vision. And then that just kind of further, I think you kind of nailed it with what we've seen, or like, let's say the past 5 years or so. You see this revolving chair of, I'll just call it decision makers, within the hierarchical structure. And they have the tendency to, they're coming into maybe a new role, for example, and they have a lot of responsibility. They don't know the people that they're coming in to manage. And so they want to have some level of comfort that is going to make sure that they're successful, because I think they are thinking of themselves being successful, and it has a trickle down effect.
Right.
But then how are they going to do that with a whole bunch of new people? Well, they're going to bring in safety blanket, comfort blanket folks, right? And so then you have another layer of someone that comes in who now has new people. And like, when does it stop? And when does that become, or when does that take over the actual focus of executing on, said culture plan that was coming out? And so I think that dilution is kind of what hinders it. And then just people not understanding it. I think communication, it's, I almost said an explicit there. It's not very good. And so I think the biggest thing is getting people's buy-in, but getting people's buy-in from a voluntary basis, instead of I have to do this or there's some negative consequence, is measurably much, much higher when you have someone who believes and is a part of, making up the culture or whatever the changes that you're introducing, and then executing on that, because you're getting that on a voluntary basis. And I'm telling you right now, there's a measurable way to quantify that to a much higher degree than, taking the stick only method.
Well, I think that what we do see, and you described it, right? New executive comes in, they have whatever responsibility. They don't know the people that are in the organization. So instead of getting to know those people, they go, oh, okay, I'm bringing in 3 or 4 people from we used to call it in the Navy, from my ward group, people I've worked with before, I know who they are, whatever. And now these people are going to do within the hierarchy the same thing, which is they're walking into a team that's been there maybe for years and kind of ignoring them, or at least talking to them, not talking with them. My good friend, Kevin Shields, he and I use these military analogies a lot about leadership, but there's this big problem that happens with new officers who walk into like a squad or a department on a ship, and they're coming out of school and they're like, oh, I'm a ensign, right? I'm the officer. You have to do what I say. And he's talking to some chief petty officer who's been in the Navy for 25 years who knows more about that job than that officer will ever forget. But when he gets ignored, guess what those people do? They fall into, really, I would call it not directly sabotage, but this passive aggressive mode of, okay, sir, that's what you said you wanted done. Yeah. In my head, I'm going, I know that's going to lead to a disaster, but you're not willing to engage with me or allow me to introduce my knowledge. So therefore, I'm going to let this whatever happen. And we had 2 classic examples of that a couple of years ago, where multi-billion-dollar Navy ships drove in front of commercial vessels, resulting in 17 people dead and 2 massively expensive warships that are going to be scrapped. And the reason why that happened is because of exactly what I just described. But that happens in business as well. And so I think where executives fall short is you've got to get into the organization. I think you have 2 choices if you're going to do a change. If you really feel like the organization is going to be that resistant to change, then why don't you just set up whatever you're doing as a greenfield, where you bring in new people and you start from scratch, but you got to address the emotional level we just talked about. People's desire that what I'm doing now is almost always better than the unknown, because I just don't know. And and then if it's not my idea and I'm not bought into it, I don't have any emotional need to change. And I think that's the other thing that companies have lost over the years, is recognizing who change agents in the organization are. And they're not, usually don't
spheres
have
of influence. No, it's spheres of influence. And if you think about the adoption on that same point, I think you're making a really good point here. And I don't say that often, because you often don't make good points. But if you look at it from a spheres of influence perspective, that's right. You did intro me pretty nicely. I better be nice on this. This cast.
No reason to be nice now, because I'll catch up on the back end.
Yeah. All right. Touche. But spheres of influence, and if you look at that spheres of influence from peer recognition groups, in my experience, when you have peer recognition, that's like a force multiplier, because then the audience that you're really trying to, penetrate and get the messaging, the clear communication to, what better steward of that message than their own? And I think if you, involve them in the solution, right, and the effort that you're trying to exude, you get a whole different type of buy-in, because now they are a part of the solutioning process. And now, to what you just said, you kind of open up the pathway for them to have dialogue and provide input. That's like critically important to not taking the stick-only approach. Like, hey, look, you're a peon, you're below me, know your place and listen to my instructions, and you'll be fine. Like, that's not the environment. I believe it or not, there was an environment where we were able to get away with that stuff. Almost curse again. Get away with that stuff, because talent was more dispensable then. I'm not saying it was right, by the way, but it was more dispensable, and then you could bring someone in who was willing to do that. That's not the case anymore. That's why we have the issues that we have.
And I agree. So I guess the interesting question isn't that this isn't a problem, right? I think we can sit here and go on for a long time about, like, if you've got organizations have inertia, it's emotional, it's and if you don't deal with it, your change efforts are going to crash and burn. I mean, we've seen this over and over again. So I think that the real issue is, and this is not an easy thing, is to identify who the change agents in an organization or a group are. Yep. And again, those are the people that other people talk to in the break room. And you see, in sales, we used to talk a lot about that. Like, you ask a question and you see who everybody turns to answer the question.
Yeah.
And that may be somebody with a title. Often it's not. It's just that person who, through their personality and their knowledge and their influence, it is the alpha in that group.
Right.
And if you want to move that group along, you got to get that alpha on your team. We did this project many years ago with a company I was working for as the CIO, and we, for a variety of reasons, we looked at the Philippines to move some of our customer-facing resource activity to, and it was very, very controversial, right? And the way I got over it was I took the guys with the biggest noise and then put them in charge of going to the Philippines and training the new team.
Mm-hmm.
And so suddenly they went from being up in the peanut gallery yelling.
Yep.
They're on the court. They got to play. And it completely changed the situation, because then those guys treated that team as their team, even though they then came home and that team was, 8,000 miles away, but they were all their people, the people they had hired, coached, recruited, and holy God, it was, I won't say it was 100% effective, but getting the change agents involved, getting them to think that I hate the term co-op, but you're really doing that. You're co-opting them into, it's kind of like, hey, you got a lot to say up there. You say you can play better quarterback? Let's go do a few plays.
Yeah, but it's giving them the opportunity. And that's the thing that I think a lot of companies and organizations have lost sight of, is that level of trust that comes with the development. And look, there's risks that come with it too. And I always tell my teams, half of the things that we're going to try are going to fail. Quite literally, statistically, 50% of the things that we try are going to fail. Now, the degree at what they fail, we have to account for. And then the frequency of when we make a judgment call to say, okay, there's adjustments we can make and it'll still have an optimal outcome. May not be the hypothesis we originally saw it, but it's still going to be an improvement. Or we say, you know what? Nope, pull the plug completely and we start over from scratch. But we got to give them the chance. And you know what? We get their buy-in, they create the solutions. They're the ones, doing the jobs. I always involve someone who actually has to do the actual work. If I do it from my point of view, it's more theoretical. I have a little bit of experience, but not the hands-on experience they have. And then they appreciate that. And then you get genuine, authentic feedback from them, and they feel comfortable doing that. That's how you get away from confirmation bias, first of all, and you start getting them to open up and give their true thoughts. And then you have that group get together, solution that problem, again, as a volunteer basis. And it brings them that much closer. And then they're able to take that back to another team that maybe wasn't involved with it. And then that spreads out. Now, it takes a little bit of time to do, but if you actually want to implement culture change or a project or whatever the case may be, that's kind of the approach I highly recommend you take. It's not instant gratification that we're so used to nowadays, but it's the right thing to do. Yep. It's what you see the results from. And honestly, that's how you build a stronger foundation that becomes more adaptable to the variables that are thrown your way, constantly, especially today.
No, I think you're right on. And I think, as a wrap up for a really good conversation, I mean, the issue is you've got to address emotional inertia, right? People will want to keep doing what they're doing, even if it's painful, over trying to change to an unknown. Yeah. I think from your point, you think about it, you've got to identify and get people engaged in the change, whether that's, describing it and letting them volunteer, which most companies don't do, like asking the question, who wants to be part of this change? Yeah. That's a very simple question to ask, and I think it never gets asked. You'll be surprised often how people might want to respond to that. I also like the idea that you've got to recognize the inertia exists. You've either got to plan to address it, or you've got to say, I can't overcome it. I'm going to do something just from scratch, and set up maybe a new company, a new organization, and get real results. And then I can talk about how do I either migrate people from one to the other, or stand it up and let the other business run, or do whatever you need to do with that. But the point is,
on that point, Tim, I think you're really right. Some company should come up with a product that helps them understand what their employees are thinking, and then figure out how to ensure that they interact with you and share what's going on with them and their aspirations, and then you use that with data to go back in action and create plans from.
Wow.
I mean,
that would be a really powerful product for a company like Transform CX to bring to market under the name Balance Wise IQ. But I like the product pitch. It was perfect, and it fits right where we're talking about, which is you got to recognize that human beings are emotional. They are. We all are. And if we don't address that, and we don't listen for it, and we don't engage, we're going to fail. And I think this is, we can talk about different generations and responses or whatever. It's always been the same. Human beings are emotional people, and how they respond and how they can respond may be influenced by the culture around them. But you're right. So we've got to address, hey, we're going to do something. Here's why it's good for you that we do this, right? Or here's what we're doing. You want to be part of this. You want to help us do this, accomplish this, and make it better. Blah, 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 blah. And I think you're right on with that. So I think this is a really good one. And I want to keep revisiting this because, to your point, our Balance Wise IQ product is a part of that, right? It's the first part of listening and engaging. But there's a lot more to this. And I think, as we've talked about in other podcasts, the leadership of today, many of them don't understand this. They came into these environments where money was easy, businesses were growing without, in many cases, I'm not saying the jobs weren't hard, but there wasn't this kind of like, holy crap, things are blowing up in our face. Like,
right.
When I paid $5.30 for gas the other day at Costco, I was going, yeah, okay, I could feel it now. That hurt right in the sciatica when I paid that bill. But anyway. All right. Well, as always, you want to close this out, Mr. Andreas?
Yeah, no, I think it was some good dialogue here. We'd love to hear dialogue from the audience, listening audience. What do you think? What experience have you had in figuring out how to have folks embrace change and act and implement that change, right? So we'd love to hear any comments there. And I think it was a good talk, Tim, and a good plug for Balance Wise IQ, and good plug for Stop Doing Stupid Shit, the book. I mean, check that out. Read that too. There's a lot of tips in there on how to stop doing, stupid emotional inertia. Solutioning, I guess.
No, you're right on. And so with that, everybody, so we'll be on LinkedIn. Please follow us. We'll also be on YouTube, so please subscribe. And if you have any questions, comments, or feedback, let us know in either of those channels. We'd love to hear it. And with that, adios, amigos. We're off to another week of fun and frolic in the world of customer and employee experience. This is Tim Keefe.
Yep, Andreas Wieman. And Tim forgot to mention our MySpace page, too. Check out our MySpace page. Thanks, everybody. Have a good one.
Take care. Bye.